In the formation of my dissociative identity, a lot of different alters were fragments before they formed into complete alters. And so I'm going to kind of give a little general timeline of how they formed. So possible trigger warning, because it'll be, talk of formations and that's coping with traumas and things. So just a heads up, that's what we'll get into, and we'll see where this goes. The original trauma happened around age 4 for me and for us. And so Ocean is our core part, which means she holds the core or original trauma that led to the development of our dissociative identity. And so at age 4, this started to happen. Ocean holds that original trauma, those particular memories. She's a submit part of consciousness. She's related with the parasympathetic nervous system. And so the autonomic nervous system regulates everything, your whole brain, your body, everything that it does. It has 2 different branches. Your parasympathetic nervous system is in charge of rest and digest, and then your sympathetic nervous system is the fight, flight, freeze response. And so if you have like adrenaline rush and stuff like that, like that's kind of involved with the sympathetic nervous system. And so as us, me, we, whatever, as a child we're developing, age 4, now there's, different parts of consciousness. And then, so Ocean formed, Crystal formed, and then Bambi formed somewhere in there. And then around age 10 or so, Abby was formed. She's a flight part of consciousness. And so now we're starting to get into the sympathetic nervous system more, a little bit more dysregulated on that end of things. If your parasympathetic nervous system is dysregulated, it's going to cause different types of problems than your sympathetic nervous system being dysregulated. Sorry. When my parasympathetic nervous system is dysregulated, I'm sleeping a lot more, I'm eating more, I'm just kind of more quiet, reserved, whatever, maybe socially isolated. When my sympathetic nervous system is dysregulated, I have high anxiety, high insomnia, I'm always on edge, it's hyperarousal, it's a different thing. But because they're intertwined, they're both part of the autonomic nervous system. If one's dysregulated, the other's kind of, it's a balancing act. And so as a child, it gets more dysregulated as you approach those preteen years. And so Abby, a flight part, was formed in our consciousness around age 10-ish. And then around that time, maybe 10, 11, 12, Xena Zintar started to form. And she was a fragment at first. And what that means is kind of just a very one-dimensional character. There's kind of just this one thing that she is or does or whatever, not this fully formed, multifaceted being. And so Xena is a flight part that experiences negative stimuli as positive, and so abuse is pleasure, and so that helps us cope. And so when Ocean starts having flashbacks, Xena comes into the consciousness and takes on those memories and experiences them as something positive. Xena started to form as a fragment. Let me take a step back. Xena was needed in the beginning because our body started to develop. It hit that, adolescent age, started to form into a woman. And in that process of the body developing, Ocean's memory started to surface for the first time. And so Xena was created to take those on so we would be safe from experiencing the trauma all over again as actual trauma. But then I didn't understand why I was having these weird dreams of being raped and sexually abused, but it was not a bad thing. It wasn't a nightmare. It was a dream. And so I didn't understand it. So I was very disturbed and kept it all to myself and stuff. And then once high school began, Xena was someone who could actually come out front and was actually a person who engaged. And that's when she became an alternate state of consciousness rather than just an internal fragment. And so once a fragment, over the years formed. And so it's really interesting to see this, as the neural pathways build and had more consistency, she grew in her depth as a person. And so real person, but not a separate body, obviously. That's why it's in quotes. When high school began, that's when the fight part started to really develop. And so Kingsley, the accountant, the darkness. There were several different fight parts, coral, several different fight parts that were created, and some were fully formed altars, and some were fragments that grew into altars through, later on in high school. And I kind of saw the development, and I recognized things going on, but I didn't know why. I would recognize this little thing and it was scratching the surface, but I had no idea what the root cause was of this thing I was noticing. And so, I noticed the day that I decided no one was going to hurt me, and I felt a switch in me, and I felt like the coldness of my heart change. Like I felt this switch in me very dramatically, very obviously. Like I was noticing these things, and now I can go back and put those observations into perspective and understand how my consciousness has developed over the years. It's really, truly fascinating. And so now there's almost a dozen or so parts of consciousness. And high school was rough and things. But after the first year of high school, I don't think any more were created until adulthood. And so it was rough, but those original ones created at age 14 carried me through to age 18. And then as I began adulthood, there were more traumas. And so later on, some altars coped, but then after a while, they fractured off more. And so in the last couple years, I think 4 different altars have been created, including a fragment. Janina Fisher's book, Healing the Fragmented Cells of Trauma Survivors, Overcoming Internal Self-Alienation, talks about the formation and how it starts with the submit and attach parts in early childhood, and how once it hits those adolescent years, the fight, flight, freeze parts start to develop more. And it shows this timeline of things, and it explains the process and explains how to heal and how to connect all the dots. And it's really incredible. And so I'm hoping, the hope is to someday use that form that she created this book for therapists. I want to create a book like that, but for clients, where, hey, you're struggling with this, here's a workbook for the side, not to be in replacement of therapy, but maybe to be used in conjunction with it, or if someone doesn't have access to therapy, that kind of thing. And so, there are workbooks out there for major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder. There's even ones for, there are a few for borderline personality disorder and PTSD, but nothing for dissociative identity disorder. Nothing that tells you, hey, here's a worksheet for connecting with your parts. Here's a journal prompt for connecting with your inner child. Here's a, here's a checklist for identifying your different parts within your structural dissociation. There's nothing like that. It doesn't tell you the process of how altars get names. It doesn't tell you any of the stuff that I've had to figure out on my own the past year. And so the goal, ideally, is to be able to create a workbook someday. And so with that goal in mind, I'm starting with the Healing Journey Homeschool. And there'll be a few basic courses that's kind of created for anybody. And then there's going to be a few very specific courses created for those with structural dissociation. And it'll be identifying parts, creating coping tools for parts, communicating with parts, learning to love your parts, things like that. And all of that starts here and now with the work I'm doing on a daily basis, one moment at a time, one small climbing moment at a time. And the support I receive, the incredible, loving, phenomenal, empowering support I receive through Instagram messages and through my incredible patrons, keeps me going and allows me to do this work right here, right now, despite constant dissociation. I'm learning how to successfully live with dissociative identity disorder thanks to your support. We are going to change the world. We already are. And I'm so grateful that I get to join this incredible community as I try to change the world. Thank you for joining me on this epic, magical, miraculous healing journey. And let's just keep growing together, soul friends. I'm so excited to see where things take us.